Welcome to Capitol Preview, a weekly bipartisan discussion with Iowa legislators about the key issues facing our state. Brought to you by Mediacom.
Hi, welcome to another edition of Capitol Preview. My name is Bill Peard. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Iowa Cable and Telecommunications Association. Our guest here this morning is Representative Scott Ourth, Democrat from Ackworth, House District 26. Welcome, Scott, to Capitol Preview.
Thanks for having me back, Bill.
I'm just going to, this is kind of a conversational issue that we do. We're trying to educate our constituents and our viewers about what's happening up on the Hill, and so I'm just going to jump into some important things that I think are happening, and that's K through 12 educational funding. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, what's going on?
Sure, I can. Well, for years now, since about 2011, I guess, K through 12 funding, that is to say supplemental state aid, or what used to be known as allowable growth, has been decreasing and decreasing and decreasing by degree every legislative session. And it's become problematic. There was a day, my friends on the other side of the aisle claim that the reason we have to cut education funding, K through 12 funding, is because tax revenues are down, commodity prices are low, and so our tax revenues aren't as robust as they sometimes are, and so that's the reason they're saying that we have to do this. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you what, Bill, if you go back in time, back to the 80s, late 70s and 80s, when we had the farm crisis, and it was in full tilt mode about the time I was getting out of college in '81. It was a priority for the legislature back then to make sure our children, despite the budget problems, to make sure our kids were still being educated and given the best education possible. So we had a farm crisis on the one hand, terribly low tax revenues, and we were ranked number one in the nation in public schools. And that's because we funded them at 7% and 8%, 9% sometimes, even during a time that was much worse than we have now. So I can tell you, it's not a budget issue, it's a priority issue. And I don't think our priorities are established correctly right now. The other thing with K-12 education, and there are a lot of folks up there who want to use taxpayer money to start these things called ESAs, or educational savings accounts, which takes taxpayer money and puts it in a private savings account for a family that wants to send their kid to a private school or a parochial school. Now, this year, the majority party hasn't been talking about allowable growth in terms of percentage, and it's 1%, which is woefully insufficient to take care of our public education. Instead, they're saying that they're putting $37 million new dollars into it, which makes it sound big, $37 million. Well, okay, $37 million. They want to put 217, I think, million, 37 million as opposed to 217 million into these educational savings accounts, like 5 times more money, taxpayer money, to allow children to go to the private or parochial school of their parents' choice, and the taxpayers are footing the bill for it. So my question on that one simply is, where's the tipping point? At what point, with all those taxpayer dollars invested in private schools, do they actually become public? When do I get a say in how my taxpayer dollars are being expended in these private school venues? I'm sworn by the oath I took to uphold, provide for a free and appropriate public education, and that's what I intend to do.
You explain that very well. That's one of the best explanations I've heard. So,
well, it's we've been talking about it for a while.
I know, yeah. I know you're a big water quality person too. So you want to and water quality's been hot, continues to still be a hot issue in our state. So do you want to kind of give us a little overview of that?
Sure. It's a huge deal. I mean, we're a big ag state, and there's, we've been fertilizing our fields and using pesticides and for a long time. And, the soil holds on to that kind of thing to a degree. releases it also into the streams and waterways. And so, Iowa has been at least as large a contributor to the hypoxia zone in the Gulf of Mexico, and the pollutants that are at pretty heavy concentrations in the Mississippi and Missouri River drainage. The Mississippi drains 30-something states. It's a big, big thing.
It is.
It is, and we simply have to do more. Now, we passed a water quality bill that a lot of people said was garbage and no good. Governor Reynolds, in her Condition of the State address, said, I want water quality to be the first bill I sign. What she didn't say was, I want the Iowa Water and Land Legacy Bill that passed with 63%. Now, this is the constitutional amendment language that passed a state referendum with 63% of the vote. Now, the favorability rating is polling somewhere around 69%. Why the governor doesn't move forward with that, and what that does for your viewers who don't know, it raises the state sales tax by a penny, 3/8 of which would go directly toward water quality. Edge of field practices, in-field practices, testing, monitoring, the science of it all. And we would be able to make some serious headway if we pass that. But for some reason, Bill, there's not the will. The will of the people has been well described. But the will of the legislature, I don't know, there's just no political courage to do it. I, for one, would love to do it. I'd do it right now if I could.
There's an answer in there somewhere, right? We may not like the answer, but why it continues not to go forward.
Oh, well, one of the problems, one of the things that recently departed Bill Dix, who was majority leader in the Senate, who left in disgrace a couple of weeks ago, made it clear to the Republicans and Democrats alike on the House side that no tax increase or fee increase would ever see the light of day. In fact, we raised, I think it was 94-2, I think it was, something like that. We've all voted in the House to raise the fees on fishing and hunting licenses at the request of hunters and fishermen so that we could rebuild the Fish and Wildlife Trust Fund. I mean, again, this was a groundswell of sportsmen and women in the field who wanted to do this with overwhelming majorities across the state, and Bill Dix wouldn't take it up. It was a fee increase, so that's what we've been up against.
Well, hopefully we'll get it all figured out. Do you want to run through the Medicaid? I know that's been an ongoing issue in this state, and it still don't probably have it fixed to the point where it needs to be. And healthcare, well, Medicaid and healthcare, kind of both. So.
Well, we had a Medicaid system that certainly needed some work a few years back. Like everything else, I mean, life moves at a fairly rapid pace, and government agencies have to keep up with that. And it's not always easy, but I can tell you what we were doing before, the Iowa Medicaid enterprise. We were doing a pretty good job, and our relationship with the federal government on Medicaid dollars was fairly well established. And none of that comes without challenges. I mean, these are people who have incredible medical challenges, and they're tough to meet. But we were doing an okay job at that. And then all of a sudden, we privatized Medicaid and made healthcare a for-profit business, turned it into a business. Well, what do you think happens if people can't turn a dollar? Well, they get out. They get out of the market. It's a market-driven thing. So your health and mine become a marketplace commodity. And there is something just grossly wrong about that. And it's not working. It never was going to work. And now all these private MCOs are leaving the state. And because of that, there's a fairly substantial number in the thousands, tens of thousands of Iowans who've been left without health care. And that's unconscionable. Government should be in the business of helping people and making sure that everyone is well taken care of. And we have failed immensely on that one.
So what do those people do, Representative, when they can't get insurance? I mean, right?
They go to the hospital. They go to the emergency
room.
They
do. So with no insurance, I mean.
With no insurance.
So.
And hospitals under the law can't turn anyone away.
So
it drives their health care cost. It drives the cost of running that hospital right on up. And at the end of the day, that cost goes somewhere.
Yeah. Plus,
goes
that's not
back to us.
It's not a great feeling, right? To live without insurance. I mean,
No one, no one should live in fear of not having care, accessible, affordable care at their disposal if they or a loved one suddenly finds himself in need. All kinds of states do it. All kinds of nations do it, and they do it well. For some reason, we're so tied to this idea that everything has to be in the free market, and we're a bunch of socialists and that kind of thing. If we figure out a collective way to pool our money and pool and help bring costs down, again, it's back to political courage. I think healthcare is sacred. I think every human being in this state should have access to appropriate, affordable, modern health care. And you know what? We're a wealthy enough state and a wealthy enough nation that we could do that if we just stopped for a moment and decided to take a different path.
What about dram shop insurance? I know you've been working on that. First of all, explain to people what dram shop insurance is, and then.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Basically, what that means is retail establishments, bars and restaurants that sell liquor by the drink at a bar or at your table, beers and hard liquor and wine. They have a responsibility to monitor people that are at their establishment and see whether or not they've had too much to drink to be able to responsibly drive home or otherwise behave responsibly. Now, that's not always the easiest thing to do. Someone may have come from another bar and have had a lot to drink, and so this bartender serves them one, and then all of a sudden they're on the hook for it. The other thing is that some people are well practiced at drinking alcohol, and it's hard to tell. Their speech isn't slurred, they're not stumbling around, that kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. That's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is, since time immemorial, those establishments have had to purchase what's called dram shop insurance, liability insurance that covers them against a lawsuit should a customer go out and hurt or kill someone, heaven forbid. In the law, there are no caps on that. And so the dram shops are making an argument that they have to pay $60,000 a year for $100,000 worth of coverage. I've dug into this a little bit and personally have not found that to be the case. So what they want to do is cap damages at, I think, $75,000 property damage for your car, whatever gets hurt, and $100,000 for you. So if you get run over and killed by a drunk driver, the most you can get in that insurance settlement as your family members is $100,000. One of my colleagues on the Republican side was asked flat out whether, if that happened to his son, $100,000 was the price that he thought his son's life was worth, and the guy actually said yes. I couldn't believe my ears. Couldn't believe it. But look, insurance companies aren't, if they put a cap on there, if anybody thinks insurance companies are going to lower premiums, think again. I've gone back through the history of that kind of thing. Insurance companies don't do that. They don't lower premiums. They just don't do that. So I'm against putting a cap on that. I think judges in the courts should have the right to decide from case to case to case what any given family should receive in terms of damages based on the merits of the case.
Very good. Well, it looks like we are out of time for this morning, Representative Ourth, and I appreciate you very much coming here this morning. You were very informative, and you told people a lot of what's going on down there at that Capitol. So appreciate your hard work. And I ask you to tune in again for another episode of Capitol Preview.